The message arrived on a quiet Tuesday morning. Humanity had been searching the stars for signs of intelligent life for centuries, launching countless probes and broadcasting endless signals into the vast darkness of space. When the answer finally came, it wasn't through their expensive radio telescopes or space stations. Instead, every screen on Earth suddenly displayed the same image, a symbol that looked like a spiral of stars. At the United Nations Emergency Assembly in New York, world leaders gathered to witness humanity's first contact with alien life. The room fell silent as the spiral symbol transformed into a holographic projection of what appeared to be a council of different alien species. People of Earth, the tallest figure spoke in perfect English, its voice somehow both mechanical and smooth. We are the Collective, an alliance of the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. We have been watching your development with great interest. Ambassador James Wilson stood at the podium, his hand steady despite the weight of representing all of humanity. We are honored to make your acquaintance, he said, choosing his words carefully. May I ask why you've chosen this moment to reveal yourselves? The Alien Council members looked at each other in what seemed like amusement. Your species has reached a crucial point in its development, another figure replied, this one looking like a shimmering cloud of light. We wish to offer Earth membership in the Collective. Excited whispers filled the assembly hall. Membership in an advanced alien alliance could solve many of Earth's problems: disease, energy crisis, environmental damage. But experience had taught humanity that nothing came without a price. What would this membership require? James asked. Just one small thing, the tall figure answered. We require specimens of your most dangerous and primitive life forms for our galactic exhibition. Think of it as a contribution to our shared knowledge. The UN representatives looked confused. Earth had many dangerous animals: lions, bears, sharks. But surely an advanced alien civilization wouldn't cross the stars just for a zoo collection. We would be happy to provide examples of Earth's wildlife, James offered. Perhaps we could start with... You misunderstand, the shimmering cloud interrupted. We want humans. The assembly erupted in shock and outrage. James raised his hand for silence, his face turning pale. Humans? You consider us primitive life forms. Your species is fascinating, the tall figure explained, as if discussing an interesting insect collection. You've barely mastered space travel, yet you've survived countless disasters. You still wage war, experience emotions that cloud your judgment, and rely on primitive biological functions. You would be the crown jewel of our exhibition. James felt his diplomatic training slipping. We are a sentient, spacefaring civilization, he said firmly, not animals to be put on display. The Alien Council seemed unmoved. Your technology is basic. Your bodies are inefficient. You still reproduce through physical contact and experience pain. These are marks of a primitive species. The tall figure leaned forward. But we are not cruel. Those chosen for the exhibition will be treated well, and Earth will receive advanced technology in return. A fair exchange, wouldn't you agree? The assembly hall grew quiet as the implications sank in. The Collective didn't see humans as equals. To them, mankind was just another interesting species to study and display, like animals in a zoo. James looked around the room, seeing the anger and determination in his fellow humans' eyes. Then he noticed something else, a slight smile on the face of General Roberts, the head of Earth's Defense Force. The general gave him a barely perceptible nod. Turning back to the Alien Council, James straightened his tie. The people of Earth will need time to consider your generous offer, he said diplomatically. How long do we have to decide? 1 Earth month, the tall figure replied. Choose your finest specimens. We await your response. As the hologram faded, James turned to face the assembly. Ladies and gentlemen, he said gravely, I believe we've just met our first alien civilization, and I also believe they've gravely underestimated humanity. The coming month would prove just how right he was. 1 month after the first contact, A sleek silver shuttle carried 12 human volunteers through the stars. Captain Tom Miller watched as they approached the massive space station that housed the collective's famous exhibition. The structure was bigger than anything humans had ever built, shaped like a giant ring with countless lights twinkling across its surface. "Remember," Tom said to his team, "we're here to observe and be observed. Keep your eyes open." What he didn't say out loud was that every member of his team had been carefully chosen, not just for their physical capabilities, but for their intelligence and training in covert operations. The shuttle docked smoothly at one of the station's many ports. As the team stepped out, they were greeted by a tall, blue-skinned alien who introduced himself as the chief curator. "Welcome to the grand exhibition," the curator said, speaking through a translator device. "Your habitat has been prepared according to our research on Earth environments." Tom noticed how the curator didn't look them in the eyes, instead speaking as if addressing pets. He shared a quick glance with Kate, their science officer, who gave a slight nod. They'd both caught the condescending tone. The curator led them through gleaming corridors filled with alien visitors who stopped to stare at the humans. Some pointed, others whispered behind strange devices, and a few even tried to touch them until the curator waved them away. "As you can see," the curator explained, "our guests are very excited to observe new specimens. You'll get used to the attention." They passed by several other enclosures, massive habitats visible through clear barriers that seemed stronger than any glass. In one, creatures that looked like giant purple cats paced back and forth. In another, beings made of crystalline structures stood completely still. Mike, their security officer, carefully counted each turn they took, mapping the station's layout in his mind. "These other species," he asked casually, "they're all primitive like us." The curator's expression shifted slightly. "They are all fascinating examples of developing life forms," he said smoothly. "Some have been with us for many cycles." Finally, they reached their designated habitat. It was a large space designed to look like a mix between a modern Earth apartment and a natural environment, with trees, a small stream, and several buildings. "This will be your new home," the curator announced proudly. "We've included elements from various Earth biomes to ensure your comfort. The barrier is one-way transparent. You won't see the observers, but they can study you naturally." As the team entered their new home, Tom noticed something odd. The other species they'd passed had seemed strangely subdued. Those crystal beings hadn't moved at all, and even the cat-like creatures had shown none of the natural curiosity you'd expect from intelligent life. Later that night, after the observation hours had ended, the team gathered in one of the buildings. They spoke in whispers, despite being told the barriers were soundproof. "Did you see their eyes?" Kate asked, referring to the other exhibited species. "They looked distant, almost drugged." "The technology here is advanced," Mike added, "but I spotted at least 3 different types of hidden monitoring devices. They're watching more than just our natural behavior." Tom nodded. "And those barriers, they're not just for keeping us in. I think they're designed to keep something else out. Or maybe," he paused, "to keep something in." Just then, they heard a faint tapping sound. It was coming from the ground, beneath one of the artificial rocks. Mike carefully moved the rock aside, revealing a small hole. Inside was a note, written in simple symbols that somehow they could all understand. "Not alone. Others like you. Not what they seem. Watch the guards at feeding time. Count their steps." The team looked at each other in silence. They'd been on the station less than a day, and already their suspicions were being confirmed. This wasn't just an exhibition. It was something else entirely. "Well," Tom said quietly, placing the rock back exactly as it had been, "looks like we're not the only ones who think something's wrong here. Let's give our hosts the show they want, while we figure out what's really going on." The lights in their habitat dimmed automatically, signaling night cycle. But none of them felt much like sleeping. In the darkness, they could feel thousands of eyes watching them. And not all of them belonged to the collective. 3 weeks into their stay at the Grand Exhibition, Kate made her first breakthrough. She'd been carefully watching the other species through their habitat's transparent walls, making notes on their behaviors. Something wasn't adding up. "Look at this," she whispered to Tom and Mike during their morning meal. She slid her notepad across the table, careful to keep it under the hanging plant they'd discovered blocked the hidden cameras. "The feeding schedule isn't random. It's synchronized with the station's power fluctuations." Tom studied her careful drawings. Every time the station's lights dimmed slightly, the curator's assistants would appear with food. But more importantly, Kate had noticed that right after feeding, the other species became even more subdued. "The crystal beings," Mike added, keeping his voice low. "I watched them last night during the quiet hours. When they think no one's watching, they move. Fast. They're not statues at all. They're being controlled." A soft tapping sound interrupted their conversation. It came from the same hidden spot where they'd found the first message. Tom casually walked over, pretending to adjust his boot. Inside the hole was another note, this time with a small device that looked like a data chip. Later that night, after the observation hours, Kate carefully examined the chip using the basic tools they'd been allowed to bring. Her eyes widened as she decoded its contents. "This is incredible," she breathed. "These aren't just exhibition spaces, they're testing facilities. Look at these chemical formulas. They're feeding us more than just food. They're experimenting on us." Tom felt his jaw tighten. "Can you tell what they're testing for?" Kate's fingers flew over her tablet. "Based on these formulas, they're studying our adaptability, how we respond to different compounds. But that's not the worst part." She looked up, her face pale. "Some of these species have been here for decades. The crystal beings. They used to look completely different. The collective, they're not just observing evolution. They're forcing it." Mike, who had been keeping watch, suddenly raised his hand for silence. Through their habitat's barrier, they could see movement in the normally empty nighttime corridors. A group of curator's assistants was wheeling something large and covered past their section. The cover slipped slightly, revealing what looked like a stasis pod. Inside was a new creature, something that looked almost like a mix between the crystal beings and the cat-like species they'd seen earlier. "That's why they wanted humans," Tom said quietly. "We're not just exhibits. We're raw material." Just then, their habitat's lights flickered, an unscheduled power fluctuation. Through the transparent barriers, they saw something extraordinary. The crystal beings were moving, making shapes with their bodies. It wasn't random movement, it was a message. Kate quickly translated the geometric patterns. "Help us. Humans strong. Humans free." "They know about us," Mike realized. "Our reputation. Earth might be less advanced, but we're known for something else. Resistance," Tom finished. "Through all our history, humans have never accepted captivity. Not really. Even in the worst conditions, we fight back." He turned to his team. "And now we know why they really wanted us here. Not because we're primitive, but because they want to study that spirit of resistance, to either break it or use it." Kate held up the data chip. "There's more. According to these files, we're not the first group they've taken from a developing world. But we might be the first ones they've underestimated this badly." The lights flickered again, and this time they saw movement from the cat-like creature's habitat. They weren't just pacing. They were practicing. Moving in formation. Preparing. "How many other species do you think are just pretending to be broken?" Mike asked. Tom smiled grimly. "I think we're about to find out. Kate, can you use that chip to contact the others?" She nodded. "The system they use to suppress the others. It has gaps. Times when it's weaker. During the power fluctuations. Then we have work to do," Tom said. "The collective wanted to study humanity's primitive nature." "Fine. Let's show them what cornered primates are really capable of." As they planned through the night, more silent messages flashed across the barriers from other habitats. The exhibition of primitive species was about to become something else entirely, our revolution. The true monsters weren't the specimens in the cages. They were the ones who'd built them. The hidden network spread faster than anyone expected. Within days of Kate cracking the communication system, the human team had made contact with 20 different species across the exhibition. Each new connection revealed more horrors about the true nature of the collective. They took us during our first space flight. The crystal beings transmitted during a power fluctuation. Their geometric patterns flickered with emotion. Our whole exploration team. They told our world we died in an accident. Tom sat with Kate and Mike in their habitat's blind spot, recording each new story. The cat-like beings, called the runners by others, shared their tale next. Our world resisted. They released a virus, weakened us, said they came as saviors. But the most disturbing message came from a species they hadn't even seen yet, hidden in the restricted sections. Deeper levels. The message read, failed experiments. Thousands. Help them too. Mike sketched a rough map of the station based on all the information they'd gathered. The exhibition level is just the surface, he explained to the team. Below us are at least 3 more rings. That's where they keep the ones they're actively changing. Kate studied the chemical formulas they'd collected from other species. Each feeding time, they adjust the compound slightly. They're not just watching us evolve. They're steering it, testing how far they can push changes before a species breaks. But why? Tom wondered aloud. Why collect so many species just to remake them? The answer came that night, through a series of coded taps from the runners. Their message was clear. Slaves. The collective wasn't building the zoo. They were creating the perfect workforce. Each species was being modified for specific tasks. Their will slowly broken through chemical control. Some for mining. The message continued. Some for fighting. Some for thinking. Perfect slaves for every need. The team worked through the night, establishing a secure communication network using the power fluctuation patterns Kate had discovered. They learned that many species still had hidden abilities the collective hadn't detected. The crystal beings could store and transmit energy. The runners could move faster than any recording device could track, and others had powers they'd kept secret for years. Humanity's gift isn't just resistance, Kate realized as she coordinated between groups. It's bringing others together. We've been doing it through all our history, forming alliances, building communities. Tom nodded. We need to reach the lower levels. If there are others trapped down there, they might be too far gone for the collective's control. Natural rebels. Mike returned from his observation post by the barrier. I've been watching the guard patterns. There's a service shaft 2 sections over. During shift changes, it's unguarded for exactly 3 minutes. The team gathered their makeshift tools, medical instruments they'd modified, exercise equipment they'd carefully reshaped. The collective had been so confident in their containment systems that they'd never considered how humans could repurpose seemingly harmless items. Tonight, Tom decided, the crystal beings can create a power surge as a distraction. The runners will pass the message through their section. We go down, make contact with the lower levels, and start building our real army. Kate held up her tablet, showing a message from one of the newly contacted species. They want to know our terms, what we want in return for helping them. Tom thought about Earth, about the collective's first message offering them membership as exhibits, about all the worlds that had been tricked, invaded, or broken by these supposed advanced beings. Tell them we want what humanity has always wanted, he said, a fair chance and the opportunity to punch bullies in the face. The message was translated and sent through the network. Within moments, responses flooded back, geometric patterns, energy pulses, subtle movements, all saying the same thing, yes. As their habitat's night cycle began, Tom looked out at the seemingly peaceful exhibition. Tomorrow, everything would change. They would reach the lower levels, find more allies, and begin the real work of liberation. The collective had wanted to study humanity's primitive nature. They were about to learn why Earth's history was filled with stories of successful revolutions, not just obedient slaves. The underground resistance was ready. The monsters who ran the exhibition would soon discover just what kind of beasts they'd really caged. The service shaft was darker than anything Tom had expected. As he led Kate and Mike down into the lower levels of the station, their makeshift light sources revealed walls covered in strange, pulsing tubes. Life support systems, Kate whispered, scanning with her modified medical device. But not for us. The atmosphere down here, it's completely different. They'd reached the bottom just as the crystal being's power surge ended above. The corridor ahead split into 3 paths, each marked with symbols they'd never seen before. But it was the sounds that made them freeze, echoing cries that seemed to come from every direction. This way, Mike pointed to the left path, where the symbols glowed a sickly green. That's where they take the specimens after feeding time. I saw it in the guard rotation patterns. The team moved silently, years of training keeping them invisible to the scattered security sensors. What they found in the first chamber would haunt them forever. Rows of transparent tubes filled the massive room, each containing a being in various stages of transformation. Some were partially crystalline, others had features from multiple species merged together. All of them were awake, their eyes following the human team's movement. They're aware, Kate choked out, checking her readings. These aren't failed experiments. They're the successful ones, the ones that survived the process. Tom approached one of the tubes where a creature that looked like a mix of 3 different species pressed its hand against the glass. Its eyes were completely intelligent, pleading. The collective isn't just collecting species, Mike realized, examining a nearby control panel. They're harvesting traits, mixing and matching to create something new. Kate managed to interface her tablet with the station's systems through a maintenance port. Files began streaming across her screen. It's worse than that. These aren't separate experiments. She looked up, her face pale. They're all steps toward a single goal. The collective, they're trying to create a perfect species, and they're using all of us as raw materials. A soft tapping drew their attention. One of the transformed beings was communicating through the tube's glass. Kate translated the pattern. Leaders. Not many. Disguised. One species controls all. The collective council, Tom said. All those different alien representatives we saw. They're the same species, Mike finished, using some kind of advanced holographic technology to appear different, creating the illusion of a diverse alliance. More tapping. Kate's hands shook as she translated. They take best parts, strong bodies, smart minds, mix all. Make perfect slaves, perfect army. How many? Tom asked through Kate's tablet. The answer chilled them. Millions. Many stations, many sectors. Building army. For war. Before they could ask more, alarms began blaring throughout the facility. Not the normal security alerts. These were different. Emergency lights flashed as the station's computer announced. Quarantine protocol initiated in lower sectors. Containment breach detected. They know we're here, Mike said, checking their escape route. But Tom was watching the tubes. Inside each one, the transformed beings were becoming more active, their movements more coordinated. The containment breach wasn't about the human team. It's not us, he said. Look. Cracks were appearing in several tubes. The beings inside were changing again, but not from the collective's experiments. They were changing themselves, using what had been done to them as a weapon against their captors. They needed to know they weren't alone, Kate realized. All this time, they've had the power to fight back. They just needed hope, Tom finished. They needed to know someone would help them. The first tube shattered completely, its occupant stepping out on legs that shifted between crystalline and organic forms. Others followed, each one demonstrating abilities that showed exactly why the collective had wanted their species traits, and why they should have been more careful about combining them. "Get back to the upper levels," Tom ordered his team. "Contact every species in the exhibition. Tell them it's starting now." As they raced back toward the service shaft, behind them arose a sound that had never been heard in the station's lower sectors: cheering. The experiments had discovered they weren't failures after all. They were an army, and they had just been activated. The true monsters of the galaxy were about to learn a harsh lesson. When you take pieces of many species and force them to evolve, don't be surprised when they evolve beyond your control. Chaos erupted across every level of the station. The perfectly controlled exhibition had transformed into a battleground in minutes. Tom, Kate, and Mike raced through the corridors as alarms blared and barriers began failing everywhere. "Status report," Tom shouted as they reached their habitat level. Kate checked her tablet, now linked to the station's emergency channels. "The crystal beings have taken control of the power systems. The runners are freeing everyone they can reach. And the lower levels." She paused, watching the security feeds. "The transformed ones are unstoppable. They're using everything the collective did to them as a weapon." Through the broken barriers, they could see the collective's security forces rushing in. But they weren't the organized, superior beings they'd pretended to be. Under the pressure, their disguises were failing. "Look," Mike pointed at a group of guards whose forms seemed to flicker. Behind their advanced holograms, every single one had the same basic shape: tall, gray-skinned creatures with multiple eyes. One species, Tom remembered. They'd been pretending to be many different advanced races, but they're all the same. A massive explosion rocked the station. Through a viewport, they saw ships appearing out of nowhere, vessels that had been hidden nearby, watching Earth. But they weren't coming to help the collective. "That's the Earth Defense Fleet," Kate exclaimed, recognizing the designs. "They followed us. They've been waiting for this." Tom smiled grimly. "Humanity didn't just send 12 volunteers. We sent a trigger for something bigger." The station's main viewing screen activated, showing the collective's true leaders in their real form. Their multiple eyes blazed with anger as they addressed the rebelling species. "Stop this foolishness," the leader demanded. "You are nothing but test subjects. Primitive species we uplifted. Without us." The screen suddenly split, showing another face: General Roberts from Earth's Defense Force. "Without you," the general interrupted, "these species would have developed naturally. Instead, you played God, created weapons you couldn't control. And worst of all, you didn't even realize what you were really making." All around the station, the freed species were working together. The crystal beings channeled energy to power the runner's speed. The transformed beings from below used their combined abilities to protect the weaker ones. And humans, with their talent for strategy and coordination, brought them all together. "You wanted to create the perfect species." Tom spoke into Kate's tablet, broadcasting to every section of the station. "Look around. Perfection isn't about having every power or ability. It's about working together, supporting each other, something you never understood." The station shook again as Earth's fleet engaged the collective's hidden ships. But the collective's vessels were scattered, uncoordinated. Without their illusion of superiority, they were revealing their true nature: cowards who had stolen technology and power from others. "All sectors reporting in," Mike announced, checking the security feeds. "The medical labs are secured. The breeding chambers are being evacuated. The control center," he grinned. The transformed beings just broke through the main doors. Through the station's windows, they could see more ships arriving, vessels from other worlds that had lost people to the collective's exhibitions. They'd been watching too, waiting for a chance to strike. "You know what the funny thing is?" Kate said, watching the collective's leaders flee from their own creation. "They really did create something perfect, just not what they intended." She was right. All around them, different species were working together, using their unique abilities in ways the collective never imagined. The very diversity they had tried to harvest and control was now their undoing. "Send word to all sectors," Tom ordered. "Tell them to secure their areas, but don't pursue the fleeing leaders. We're not like them. We don't cage sentient beings." As the battle died down, and the station fell under the control of the liberated species, a new message began spreading through the halls. It wasn't in any specific language, but somehow every species understood it. "We are not your specimens. We are not your slaves. We are free." The collective had wanted to study primitive beings. Instead, they had created something unprecedented. The first truly united alliance of free species in the galaxy. And it had started because they underestimated humanity's most primitive trait, the unstoppable drive to fight against oppression. 1 month after the uprising, the exhibition station had become something entirely different. What was once a prison now served as the headquarters for the newly formed alliance of free species. Representatives from dozens of worlds gathered in the transformed main hall, where display cases had been replaced with meeting areas and communication centers. Tom stood at the observation deck, watching ships come and go. Some carried rescued specimens back to their homeworlds. Others brought diplomatic missions from planets that had lost contact with their exploration teams years ago. Each reunion revealed more of the collective's crimes and strengthened the growing alliance. "Latest report from Earth," Kate said, joining him at the window. "The defense fleet found 3 more exhibition stations in nearby sectors, all liberated now. The transformed beings have been incredible at breaking the collective's control systems." "And the collective themselves?" Tom asked. Mike appeared with a security update on his screen. "Running. Their leadership structure is completely broken. Turns out their whole society was built on maintaining that illusion of being multiple advanced species. Once that broke," he smiled, "let's just say their own people weren't too happy about being lied to for generations." Below them, in what used to be the primitive species exhibition area, a remarkable scene unfolded. Crystal beings were teaching others how to channel energy. The runners shared their techniques for resisting chemical control. And the transformed beings, once considered failed experiments, now helped coordinate between different species using their unique combination of abilities. "You know what the strangest part is?" Kate said, checking her readings of the station. "The collective's research actually proved something they never intended. All these species, us included, really did evolve into something greater, just not the way they planned." She was right. The forced evolution experiments had backfired spectacularly. Instead of creating perfect slaves, they had created beings who understood both the value of independence and the power of working together. The transformed ones, in particular, had gained not just physical changes, but a deep empathy for all forms of life. A small ship docked at the station, bearing the marks of Earth's diplomatic corps. Ambassador James stepped out, looking considerably more relaxed than he had during the first contact. "The United Earth Council has a proposal," he announced to the gathered representatives. "We'd like to offer Earth as a neutral meeting ground for the Alliance. Not as leaders, we're as new to space as many of you, but as hosts. A place where all species can gather as equals." The response was immediate and positive. Earth's reputation had grown enormously. Not because of advanced technology or military might, but because humans had proven something crucial. True civilization wasn't measured by technological advancement, but by how you treated others. "There's still work to do," Tom told his team as they watched the proceedings. "The collective's victims will need help rebuilding. Their home worlds need to be protected. And we need to make sure nothing like this ever happens again. That's why we're establishing the Liberation Protocol," Kate added, showing them her tablet. The screen displayed a new agreement being shared across the galaxy. Any species encountering advanced civilizations now had the right to demand proof of their claims. No more disguises, no more tricks. Mike laughed suddenly, drawing their attention. "You know what's funny? The collective wanted to study humanity's primitive nature, our aggression, our emotions, our drive to fight back." He gestured at the hall full of cooperating species. Turns out those primitive traits were exactly what the galaxy needed. Through the station's vast windows, they could see ships from Earth arriving with aid supplies, medical teams, and construction crews. Humanity had stepped onto the galactic stage, not as conquerors or as specimens, but as helpers, using their long experience with overcoming oppression to assist others. They wanted beasts, Tom said quietly, watching a group of transformed children playing with human doctors, all traces of fear gone from their engineered features. Instead, they found out who the real monsters were, and more importantly, he smiled as a crystal being and a runner worked together to create a beautiful light display for the children. They helped us all find our humanity. The exhibition station had been designed to showcase the galaxy's most primitive species. Now it stood as a monument to something far more powerful, the undeniable truth that real strength comes not from controlling others, but from helping them be free. The age of the collective was over. The age of unity had begun.